Welcome to True Crime
Tea.
and Tangents. I'm your host, Bonnie Watkins,
I'm your host, Duca.
like Madonna.
Every time.
I know, it's just I feel so awkward then because I've said two names and you've said one name, and I'm just going to have to start saying one name or something.
Well, I could throw in my middle name, just to make it two words.
Two name
Yeah.
things.
Right.
Well, what are you drinking today?
I am actually drinking a mystery sachet. I feel like.
Did you just throw the word sachet into casual conversation?
Absolutely. Who doesn't?
Well, everybody else. But it's going to start coming into style now. I can feel it.
Well, because, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm also an herbalist and I'm thinking, I put things into sachets, right? You just do that. People do that.
People do it. Nobody calls it. But I love it. I love that you used that term and used it correctly.
Do people just say bag?
Yes.
That's so beige. Anyway, I found a mystery bag of tea in the cupboard. And I was like, well, today's the day we find out what that is.
Well, have you had any drink?
Yeah, so far, based on the smell, the color, and the flavor, I'm pretty sure it's red zinger.
Okay, that actually does not tell me anything. Except for probably that the color's red.
It's in one of those, when you go to the regular store, grocery store, and you get the box sets of teas, and you get I wonder if you can buy it as its own box. But I do know I've seen it in the sample boxes where you get a whole bunch of other different teas in it from the box of teas at the grocery store.
And it's just called red zinger?
Maybe it's called raspberry red zinger, but it's definitely got the words red zinger in there. I mean, you and I both know I misquote and you correct quote. So I'm always doing a movie quote and I do it wrong, and then you come in and you save me and say the right quote.
So I'll come back next week and be like, I went to the local grocery store.
I found the actual thing. Yeah.
And it's called raspberry red zinger, clearly. Yeah. No, that sounds delicious. Mine is a black cherry berry.
Ooh.
It's also
I had that.
Good. I know you did. And I was getting ready for my tea this week, and I was like, well, I can't do the honey ginger again, which is actually what I wanted to do.
You should have just done it.
I did it last week, and so I was like, well, I need to branch out, and I need to do something at least a little bit different. But then I was looking at my tea selection, and I was like, well, the one that Juka had last week was pretty good. So
even though you didn't want to repeat a tea, and you actually wanted the tea you wanted last week, you still did both of those things.
Well, I didn't repeat my tea.
Correct. Okay, there you go.
Right. I didn't drink the same thing 2 weeks in a row.
And there you go. That's the distinguishing factor.
I mean, I do feel like our listeners should probably be prepared for the time. I don't have that many tea, right? It's not like I have 52 different tea options. So repeats will happen. I'm just trying not to have them happen, 2 weeks in a row.
Well, very good for you personally. I actually do have kind of a lot.
I know you do.
So it'll be a while before I have an opportunity to repeat. And by then I'll probably buy something.
I know. I'm really counting on you to keep that section of our podcast fresh and original. Because I have about 10, which I don't think is shabby.
That's a good amount of tea.
In my normal day-to-day life, having 10 different hot beverages to rotate through is sufficient. It's just when I'm recording the podcast that I get all anxious about it.
See, that's the opposite of what the whole thing is supposed to be about.
I know.
But take a deep breath and be like, I'm going to just drink the tea that you want to drink, or the beverage. Drink the beverage of your choice.
I mean, I don't even know why I'm stressed about it. I think there was 2 weeks running where I either had warm milk or I had my baby girl's formula bottle that counted as my warm beverage. So, I mean, at least I'm actually drinking something and not just feeding it to my daughter. I feel like that's probably progress.
So even
And
bless
we're
his heart
back.
did stop like doing construction work on the house for this, and then I forgot we were babysitting this dog, and this so I my office is in a public area, and so I kept trying to mute myself so like you wouldn't hear this dog like click click clack click click clack, and if somebody drives by or drives into the driveway, up he goes like super animated. It's insanity. So I'm trying to mute and unmute myself really fast to keep in the flow, and I didn't make it on the rest of our little tea segment. So yeah,
It's okay. It
oh well.
ended up working out really well that we had to take the short break when we did because right while I was in the middle of taking that work call, the printer, which is right next to me, unexpectedly went off because Shane printed something. And I was like, that's so loud. But it didn't matter because we weren't actually recording at that moment in time.
Yes.
Win.
Yes.
So, all
Good.
right. I feel like we should go back to your great line of the first podcast, which I've been reminded of because we just released our first episode officially, that the tea is brewed and the true crime is cued.
Oh, that is a great line.
I know, right? You said it and we loved it, and then we never said it again.
Well, I'm writing that down on a sticky note and I'm putting that up.
Yeah, because it's really good.
Okay, and I'm using a different pen instead of that pen. I'm using this pen.
So, today's murders, plural, I just want to give a little bit of a heads up to people that they're pretty dang gruesome and awful.
Oh man, I'm all nervous and anxious now.
Yeah, so um I had enjoyed a couple weeks back when we did, kind of a hometown murder in the sense that I picked one that was in Washington,
Yeah.
which is where you're currently living.
Yes. So
And
I'm so sorry. I got to tell you this.
tell me.
I talked to Isabel about it, of course, because as she was with me at the time, and she's like, "Yeah, Mom, his picture is in our school, not in like a huge glorified way, but in that school, they have since the beginning of time, since the beginning of photos, all the classes of all the graduating years up on the walls above the locker." And she's like, "Yeah, he's right there." And I was like, "What?" Anyway,
That's crazy. That's exactly what I wanted to know. I love that you
yeah.
followed up with that.
So just a little follow up on that.
That is crazy. Right in her school.
Right there, right
Just
in her school.
sharing a school with a serial killer. No biggie.
Crazy.
So I thought it would be fun to do one from the hometown that we grew up in.
Ooh.
So
Do we have
oh, Ogden?
one? Well,
Do
yeah.
we have one? My problem was choosing one.
So maybe Washington State doesn't take the cake.
Oh no, for serial killers you do.
Oh, okay. All right.
Absolutely. For murders, just generally and violent crime, probably not.
Okay. But probably not Ogden either.
No, probably not. I was when I was growing up, it was ranked on the list of one of the 100 most dangerous cities in America.
Dang. And we lived there on that busy road.
We did.
Luckily, they built a hospital across the street, so we were safe.
Well, and also we survived, right? We went out on our own as kids.
Oh my word, so much.
We employed the buddy system with, people that were a year older than me.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I buddied with you, and I'm a bit older than you.
You are. But a lot of times, that was, our mom, she was like, hey, the buddy system. And sometimes my buddy was my directly older brother who's 19 months older than I am, 17 months older than I am.
And at that time, like a stiff breeze would like blow him away because he was just like
80 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
Real tall, real skinny.
Mm-hmm. Wiry.
Yeah, I was so we grew up in Ogden, Utah. And I really have so many fond memories. So many fond memories of our childhood and growing up there. Ogden was started as a railroad town, so it has a bit of a rough and tumble history.
I love that. A little rough around the edges.
It had, one of the biggest prostitution rings that's ever been broken up was in Ogden. There was a whole underground gambling ring going on for a while. It's the history of that town is honestly so much fun to dive into.
Yes. Why didn't they teach that in high school? I would have taken that class.
I would have
The
too,
Ogden you never knew.
but want to.
I want to know.
Yeah, and it has, I mean, for the record, it's gotten a lot safer in the last 2 decades. They've made a lot of improvements. They've completely changed downtown. And it's just, and everywhere, I mean, everywhere in the country has gotten safer in the last 2 decades.
That is so good to know.
Ogden is just not an exception to that. But this crime, so my problem was picking out a crime because Ogden has a super brutal history. But when I
Right?
saw this one, it just rang something in me. I don't know what it was. It made me sad. It also made me a little bit righteously indignant. But it also brings up something we talked about last week, the death penalty, and
Okay.
the possibility of racial bias in the jury system,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
in the
yeah.
court system.
Yeah.
So, and it took place, not that you lived in Ogden in this window of time, because she grew up there, but she wasn't born there, for anybody listening, but it takes place in the 1970s. So,
Yep.
the story I'm going to tell is the story of the Hi-Fi murders.
Oh my goodness. We were still talking about those when I was old enough to understand.
Because they're straight up bonkers.
They're insane. Insane. I'm really glad you put that little like parental advisory there at the beginning because if you talk even about the barest details, they are incredibly gruesome. And sometimes I'm cleaning and they just randomly pop into my head and I think about the hi-fi murders just randomly because they're so like so stuck with me when I heard about them.
And I almost called you when I was doing the research to see if you did know about this, because I've tried to steer clear of crimes and stories that you know about. But then I decided I didn't want to ask because it wasn't going to matter. I was going to do it anyway.
Right. Well, and it doesn't, I mean, I think I learned about them, started to really like understand what was happening because mom and dad were talking about it.
Oh, I'm sure.
There was some other thing happened that kind of triggered the this conversation, and I don't even remember how old I was. But even if you had called me, I still would have said no. We have to do that because it is just wild. It is bonkers off the chart.
And it is, I would say, from what I was looking at, probably one of the most just brutal and senseless murders in Ogden's history.
Senseless. Yeah, I agree.
So my sources for this story for today's episode are the Deseret News, the Herald Journal, the Standard Examiner, the Salt Lake Tribune, Wikipedia.com, the Los Angeles Sentinel, and a book called Victim: The Other Side of Murder by Gary Kinder.
Okay.
So those first, but the first four of those were all just newspapers from
In our area.
Ogden and Salt Lake and this area, because this was so covered because it was just insane.
Yeah. Okay. Woo, Bonnie, spill the tea.
Are you ready?
Yes.
So, on April 22nd, 1974, Dale Selby Pierre, William Andrews, Keith Roberts, and 3 other men that to this day are still unidentified and unknown drove 2 different vans to the Hi-Fi shop at 2323 in Washington Boulevard in the town of Ogden right before closing time. 4 of the men, Dale Pierre and William Andrews, and 2 unknown men, entered the shop with handguns, while Keith Roberts and another unknown man stayed with the vehicles. So there was 2 people in the store at the time, 2 employees, Stanley Walker, who was 20, and Michelle Ansley, who was 18. And they were just kind of wrapping up, doing closing time things.
Yeah.
And they were
Yeah.
taken hostage, bound and gagged, and taken down into the store's basement.
Which it all should have ended there, right? It should have just been like, and they found them the next day in the basement,
Right? And
alive and bound.
that's part of what was so tragic to me about this case is this could have been in so many ways and so many different times and with less violent people, this could have been just the story of a robbery of a hi-fi electronics store.
Yep.
And the 2 people were kind of shaken up because nobody wants to be robbed at gunpoint and bound and gagged, but everybody was okay and there was only 2 people involved and they made it out safely.
And that would have been a blip. A blip
so
on the
not
third
what
page.
happened.
Right. Mm-hmm. Oh.
So these people start robbing the store, and it takes them forever. I don't know. They are just taking their sweet time. They are not in and outing this at all, because about an hour into the robbery, like they have been robbing this place for an hour roughly, a 16-year-old boy named Courtney Nesbitt dropped by the store to thank Stanley Walker, one of the employees, for allowing him to park his car in the parking lot earlier that day while he was running an errand. So he comes back to get his car and to say thank you, and he gets taken hostage and tied up in the basement with Stanley and Michelle.
Which also didn't have to happen. And I think that's what's so heinous about this. Like, as we go on, listeners, you're going to realize, like, wow, I'm so sorry I keep interrupting, because I'm like, we could stop the train. We could just, like, change tracks, like, at any point in time, right?
Literally any point, right? Because then, so it's already been an hour, still later that evening, so they're still somehow robbing the store. I don't know what is taking them so long.
Well, you have to remember, stereo equipment back in the,
It was big, but there's 6 men.
Right, and two vans. 2 vans. Yeah.
Like, you just, with 6 men and 2 vans, you filled up the 2 vans in an hour.
Maybe that was, did they take him someplace else and drop him off and then come back?
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe, because I don't understand how they're still here, because still later, after we have 3 people hostage at this point, Orrin Walker, Stanley's 43-year-old father, is like, hey, that's so weird that Stanley's not home from work yet. I'm worried about him. So he goes to the store to look for his son. And around that same time, Courtney Nesbitt's mom, Carol, is like, hey, where's my son? So she goes to the store looking for her son. So both of them are then also taken hostage and tied up.
Oh, this is like, so that my least favorite part of any roller coaster ride is this, like, they're leading like at a 45, 90-degree angle. And it's just click, 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 click. And it just seems endless because you can't see when you get to the top, right?
Yeah.
This is what this is reminding me of right now. It's just like this, like every time it's like click, 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 click.
I know, like you're going and then it just gets worse. And then
the anxiety and the stress.
It gets a little worse.
Yes.
So they have these 5 hostages. They have their stuff. They could just go. But at this point, Del Pierre told William Andrews to go and get this bottle from their van. So Andrews comes back with a bottle in a brown paper bag, and it's Drano. You know that drain cleaner, Drano?
Yes. Yeah, and it just corrodes everything in the pipes. And
so they pour it into cups, and Pierre orders the older Orrin, the father Orrin, because they all have the last name, right? So Orrin Walker. Yes. To administer it to the other hostages. But he refuses. He's like, I'm not doing that. I'm out. So he gets bound, gagged, and then like shoved face down onto the basement floor.
Oh, man.
So then Pierre and Andrews, they kind of like sit the hostages all up into sitting positions and force them all to drink the Drano.
But why? And why does he even have the Drano?
I will actually get to that in a little bit.
All right.
So immediately the Drano causes blisters on their lips, it burns their tongues, it burns their throats, it peels the flesh around their mouths. Like it doesn't kill them, but it puts them in just an extreme, excruciating amount of pain. And they're, begging for their life. They're forcing everybody to drink it, except for at this point, Orrin. So They're coughing, they're screaming. Pierre and Andrews try to duct tape their mouths to like hold it in and to stop their screaming, to hold the Drano in and to stop their screaming. But the blisters are so bad and so oozing that the duct tape won't stick.
Oh, man.
Like it's so
That's terrible.
Wet. So Orrin was the last of the hostages to be given the Drano, but he saw what was happening to everybody else. So he allowed it, and he's kind of laying down, right? He's laying down. So he allows it to pour out of his mouth, but then mimics the convulsions and the screams of everybody else so that they think that it's having the same effect on him.
Smart.
So Pierre and Andrews thought that the Drano would kill them, and he was getting angry because they weren't dying and they were being loud and they were being messy. So at that moment, he shoots both Carol and Courtney Nesbitt in the back of the head, which kills Carol but leaves her son Courtney alive.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh.
He then shoots at Orrin Walker but misses, and then shoots Stanley fatally.
How do you miss?
And
They're not running. They're not going anywhere.
they're all
How?
they're
Like, just stop torturing
they're
them
tied
already.
up. So he misses Oren. He shoots his son Stanley right in front of him. Stanley dies, and then he shoots again at Oren, and this time he grazes the back of his head with the bullet, but still does not fatally kill him. So at this point, and this is a trigger warning for anybody dealing with sexual assault. At this point, they take Michelle to the corner of the basement and repeatedly rape her, like Pierre does. He tells Andrews to leave, and then for 30 minutes, he rapes Michelle Ansley. So then he allows her to use the bathroom while he watches her, which is
Creepy.
super creepy. Then drags her back to everybody else, throws her on her face, and then shoots her in the back of the head.
Oh my word.
Her last words were, "I'm too young to die."
Yeah, and
she
correct.
is. She's right. She was 18. Her life was just beginning. So at this point, they think the only two people that are still alive are Oren and Courtney. And they think that Courtney is dead because they shot him in the back of the head and he's not moving. They realize that Oren is still alive. So Pierre gets on top of him, wraps a wire around his throat, and tries to strangle him. Somehow, Oren is...
Did they run out of bullets?
I think they probably did. Or, they shot him twice and it wasn't working. So maybe they think he's bulletproof.
Invincible?
So this still doesn't work. So Pierre and Andrews, this still gives me awful chills. They put a ballpoint pen into his ear and stomp on it until it punctures his eardrum, breaks, and exits out his throat.
Oh.
They are, at this point, confident they've killed him. So they go upstairs, finish loading equipment in the van, and leave. So almost 3 hours after they've left, Oren's wife and other son come to the store looking for their brother and father and husband, and they hear noises coming from the basement. They break down the back door, and when they see what's there, Mrs. Walker calls the police.
Yeah.
So Stanley Walker and Michelle Ansley were pronounced dead on the scene. Carol Nesbitt was taken to a hospital, now Ogden Regional Medical Center, which is what we grew up right near,
Yep.
but was pronounced dead on arrival. Courtney he was alive at the time, but they didn't expect him to live. He did end up surviving, but he had severe and irreparable brain damage and was hospitalized for 266 days before he was released.
Oh.
Oren had extensive burns to his mouth and chin and severe damage to his ear caused by the pen, but was the least injured of the two surviving victims. And because he didn't have a brain injury and he was able to speak, he was able to give a description of Williams and Andrews. And they said, so the description he gave, Williams and Andrews are the same person, Pierre and Andrews. So the description he gave of Pierre was a short-statured, bespectacled black man with a Caribbean accent. So this crime is broken. They've got the description. It's out on the radio. A couple hours after the news of the crime broke, an anonymous Air Force employee called the Ogden police and told them that Andrews had talked to him months earlier and said, "One of these days I'm going to rob that hi-fi store, and if anybody gets in the way, I'm going to kill them."
Oh, okay.
And then a few hours
after... Was he in the Air Force?
Yes.
We do have a ginormous Air Force base at Ogden.
We do. And the Air Force, the Hill Air Force Base, is very heavily featured.
Okay.
A couple hours after the police got that call, there was 2 teenage boys that were dumpster diving at Hill Air Force Base near the barracks that Pierre and Andrews lived in, and they discovered the victims' wallets and purses. And they recognized their pictures from the driver's license from the pictures that were being aired on the TV.
Okay, so maybe they've been sniffing the Drano, because let's just do a tiny bit of logic here. If you are dumping stuff in a dumpster on a base that has restricted access, it's not going to be that hard to figure out where those things came from.
Well, I think, agreed, it was not smart, thankfully for us, right, and for the police. I think
Thankfully, yeah.
They thought they left everybody dead. right? So how are the police? And there is a bit of like Hill Air Force Base is in Ogden, right? But it's
Yeah,
not like right next to this hi-fi shop.
right.
And so I
But
don't know that they would automatically like they don't think anybody's alive to give their description to the police.
mhm.
I'm assuming that Andrews is forgetting that he told somebody he was going to do this.
Who does that?
I don't. Again, just as a note, I mean, not that I want to help the criminals, but if you're going to commit a crime,
I was
don't
gonna say it, but I wasn't sure.
don't tell people you're going to commit a crime unless you want to get caught, right?
And
Like,
some people do. They want the attention.
and maybe he thought this guy would be game to join, right? Because there were other people that were. Obviously, there were 6 men in total. And this guy was like, that's weird. Don't do that. And so he just didn't talk to him about it afterward, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Well, and like the other thing is, why even take their items? Why even move the items?
Yeah, that's what you've killed them. You could just take whatever of value is on them and take that. Why are you
Right.
taking their wallets and their purses? You're there for hours. It's not like you're in a rush.
And they're going to be discovered. Like those bodies are going to be discovered.
Yes.
And then there will be a search. Like look at I don't know how big those radiuses are. I don't work for the police or anything like that, but if there's like, hey, we're looking for this information, and then somebody's casually walking by the dumpsters, I've seen them. They're huge, they're big, they're open. It's easy to glance inside and sees several wallets and purses. They're gonna be like, odd.
Yeah.
And this crime just happened.
Yeah.
Odd.
Yeah. Exactly. Like it's just they were
I'm
not.
really glad though because
I'm really glad they were stupid
yeah.
about how they committed this crime, because they needed to be caught, right? They needed to be brought to justice for what they did to these people.
Which is horrific.
So one of the detectives responded to the Hill Air Force Base, and he gathered all the airmen because, like you said, it's a restricted access base, right? So the odds are high. They found these near the barracks, and so they're like, hey, let's gather everybody in. And he just dramatically is waving each piece of evidence in the air as he's removing it from the dumpster, right? Everybody's gathered and they're watching him take it out of the dumpster. And most of the people who are gathered around are just still and watching in silence, except for 2 men, later identified as Pierre and Andrews, who were pacing around the crowd and frantically gesturing with their hands. So, okay, based on their reaction to the evidence being removed from the trash bin, as well as their vicinity to the trash bins, they were both taken in for questioning, and a search warrant was issued for their barracks.
Hot diggity.
Police found flyers for the hi-fi shop, a rental contract for a unit at a nearby public storage facility. They got a search warrant for that and found stereo equipment taken from the hi-fi shop. They identified it with serial numbers, and all of that was in the storage unit. They also recovered a half-empty bottle of Drano.
You know what? Maybe they were taking it from this hi-fi shop to the storage unit.
They might have been. They might have been.
Doing trips of it, yeah.
And then a few weeks afterwards, Keith Roberts was taken into custody after he was identified through questioning as a participant in the robbery. So we never, and I mean, for anybody who has solid belief in the snitches get stitches, they never, ever, ever say a word about who the other 3 men are. They are never identified. They are never found. Nobody has a clue who those other 3 men were.
To this day.
To this day. So like it is not it is a closed case because we've like Pierre and Andrews did the killing, right? The other 4 men did not participate in the murders, but we do not know who the other 3 men were.
Did they miscount? How do they know there were other people involved besides the ones we know about? Like, how do they know those other 3 men were involved?
I believe Oren saw additional men. I think he saw at least 4 men because there was 4 men in the store and 2 men with the vans. So I think part of that's on his testimony. They might have had. I'm honestly not sure. They might have had cameras, right? Just that they were able to catch them kind of like enough to like see a person, but not be able to identify him.
Right.
It could have been through questioning on the base, like, yeah, there was this other guy, but if the other person wasn't a base member, they wouldn't necessarily know who they were.
Absolutely, yeah.
So all 3 of them were charged with first-degree murder and aggravated robbery. And their trial began on October 15th in 1974 in Farmington. They couldn't have it in
Yep.
Ogden because it was very widely publicized, right? So the jury pool was considered to be tainted, and so they held the trial in Farmington. On November 16th, so it was almost a month-long trial, Pierre and Andrews were convicted on all charges, and Roberts was convicted of the aggravated robbery charge. And this next sentence, to me, is such a crazy marker of how differently the criminal justice system operates today than it did 50 years ago. 4 days later, Pierre and Andrews were sentenced to death.
Dang, that was so fast. Usually it's like 4 months now.
Yep, and Roberts was sentenced to 5 years to life imprisonment.
Hey, we're not going to throw like Michelle's rape into the mix at all. Like they're not going to be.
Rape was not treated as intensely then as it is today. So they were never charged with rape. They know, based off of Oren's testimony, they know that they did rape her.
Right.
And she was the only one that was found naked at the scene, which is another indicator of sexual assault, right?
Right.
But they did not charge them with sexual assault or rape, which is, I think, a tragedy, because I think Michelle's family and Michelle deserved that.
Yeah, and I think that I feel like they would have been charged with more, like I don't know, torture. Or do we have charges like that? Charges are like
we do. I am wondering, because it's all they brought this to trial fast.
Right.
So this happened in April, the end of April, and they brought it to trial in October of the same year.
Right. That's less than 6 months, or 6 months or less.
And so I'm wondering if they were favoring speed over totality. Right? They got the big ones. They had to throw in the robbery because that's how Hi-Fi is going to get compensated.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they have to throw in murder, obviously, because that is the most heinous thing they did. But wow. I wonder if they kept it a little more consolidated to be able to expedite the process.
Right. I hear you. But still, I feel like Michelle and her family. Oh,
absolutely. And I do think a huge part of it was just in the 70s, rape was not treated like it is today. It wasn't brought, oftentimes it wasn't convicted, it was convicted even less, right? Like, people did not take rape and sexual assault as seriously in the 70s as they do today.
We know it's interesting because we're talking about these, and we've had these conversations many times now by this point. And I do think it's interesting that in my brain really wants to categorize like the crimes, right? Like, and we just talked about that. So I have like, this crime is worse than this crime is worse than this crime is worse than this crime. Definitely things that we do and the way I keep it like categorized, but still, all crime, bad.
Yes, but also robbery is better than murder.
Yes, right. And I talked about that at the beginning. I was like, look at, really could have just left everybody tied up and walked away. And honestly, the other people who came to the store, like, those guys could have been like way cooler and been like, oh no, they're already gone for the day. We don't know. We're just doing this cleanup. This cleanup crew, they had to come in afterwards. They could have just lied, and turned those people away instead of taking them hostage.
And that's why you have to think that there was an element of bloodthirstiness, right? Just of wanting to kill. And you had this, I mean, because Andrews had said, I'm going to rob that Hi-Fi shop. If anyone gets in the way, I'm going to kill them. Like, they went into this with a mentality of, it's fine if we end up having to kill people.
And he thought that Drano was going to be the thing that killed them, which is insane, by the way. And if he was going to kill him, why didn't he just come up with a plan to have enough bullets to just... He had a gun, obviously. So why the Drano?
I will tell you. I do have an answer to that.
Okay.
I do have an answer to that. But you can tell also they came prepared to kill because they had the Drano, which was how their plan to kill people.
I'm sorry, did you say it was like... Did they get on like first degree premeditated murder on these charges?
At the time, it was first degree. So first degree is premeditated.
I know. I was dramatically emphasizing my point because I'm so like, it so blows my mind. So I was throwing in all the extra words.
Yeah. So Pierre and Andrews, they were convicted of first degree murder. Roberts is convicted of aggravated robbery. He actually got paroled in 1987. We'll talk more about him a little bit later.
Okay, sounds good.
So during the trial, the evidence, came out that Pierre and Andrews had always intended to kill anybody that they encountered while robbing the store. And so while they were planning this, to get to your Drano question, they were looking for ways to kill people quietly and cleanly, because a gunshot is loud, right? There's always a chance that somebody hears it. So they watched a film called Magnum Force, which came out in 1973.
Okay.
And in that movie, a prostitute is forced to drink Drano and immediately drops dead.
Oh, and they believed Hollywood?
So they were like, oh my goodness, look how efficient that is. We're going to use Drano to kill people because they'll drink it and just drop dead.
Okay. So they mixed up Drano with cyanide or something.
Or almost any other poison.
I just, like, look, I understand we didn't have the internet, but like an encyclopedia set available all over the place. It's just,
I mean, you're fine killing.
Silencer.
You're fine killing, so test it on an animal.
Oh, sheesh. And I know I hear you.
Like, I'm not saying that's better, but like, just like they thought they were doing all of this legwork to make this like a clean cut crime, and they didn't. They watched a movie multiple times and were like, yes, that's what we're going to do.
That's my frustration with these idiots.
Yeah.
Like, there's just, and they're just, okay, thank you. Carry on.
So, the official police report stated that 6 black men driving 2 vans committed the robbery. Roberts and another man remained with the cars. 2 others loaded the vans. Pierre and Andrews tortured and killed the victims. But, as we've discussed, they only had the evidence, the eyewitness accounts of Pierre, Andrews, and Roberts.
Right.
So the lead detective on the case stated Andrews was the brains behind the whole deal. Not good brains, but the brains. And Pierre was the enforcer. And Andrews corroborated that statement in 1992 in an interview that he did, when he said that he targeted the store after becoming acquainted with Stanley Walker a few months prior to the robbery, and then he blamed Pierre solely for all of the violence leading up to the killings.
Okay.
So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the criminals.
Okay.
So Dale Selby Pierre, he was 21 years old at the time of the crime. He was born in Tobago in the Caribbean.
Okay.
I'm never sure how to pronounce that word.
I've heard it both ways.
Same. I think both are correct, so it's fine. And he moved to Brooklyn when he was 17, Brooklyn, New York. In May of 1973, he entered active service with the United States Air Force, and in September of that year, he was transferred to Hill Air Force Base, where he was working as a helicopter mechanic.
Okay.
So almost as soon as he got there in October 5th, he became the prime suspect in the murder of Edward Jefferson, who was an Air Force sergeant at Hill Air Force Base at the time.
Wow.
However, while he was the prime suspect, they didn't have enough evidence to file charges on anybody.
Oh my goodness.
At the time of the Hi-Fi murders, Pierre was out on bail for a car theft from a car dealer in Salt Lake City.
Okay.
So he is not leading a squeaky clean lifestyle prior to this. This is potentially not even his first murder or murders, which would also make sense about the brutality and just how quickly he was like, yep, we're just going to kill them. So he was sentenced on November 20th, like I told you, to death. He was sentenced to 3 death sentences, technically, 1 for each of the murder victims. While he was in prison, he changed his name 27 times, reportedly to protect his family from the notoriety of being related to him. Finally settling...
His family, like his mom and dad, siblings type of a thing, or was he married?
No, like his mom, dad, siblings.
Okay.
So his name at birth was Dale Selby Pierre.
Right.
And his final legal name that he settled on was Pierre Dell Selby.
Okay.
So he didn't go crazy changing it or anything.
It's like he put his names under pieces of paper and a cup and he swished them all around. And he picked up 3 cups and that was his name.
That's my name. So he was denied clemency. There's a bunch of arguments which we'll get to about whether or not he should have been given the death penalty. But he was denied clemency. The death penalty was enforced, and he was executed by lethal injection on August 28th of 1987 at the age of 34. Sorry.
They actually did it.
They did it. Quick,
wow.
too. So I know
Good
that 13 years probably doesn't sound quick to anybody listening, but 13 years from the date of conviction to go through all of the appeal process, to go through all the arguments that were done in this case from people who stepped in, and to actually be executed on death row. 13 years is not
That's pretty
lengthy
fast.
of an amount of time.
Yep.
So at the time that he died, he bequeathed all of his money, which was $29, to Andrews.
Okay.
He declined a last meal, and he spent his final day fasting, praying, singing hymns, and reading the Bible.
Okay. I feel like that's been my word of this story has so blown me away that I feel like my word of the podcast has been okay. I just accept it. This is what has happened.
Yeah, reportedly, the Deseret News reported that his last words right before his execution were, "I'll be glad when this is over."
So will other people, bud. So will other people.
Yep. So at his clemency hearing, when he was trying to not be executed, Pierre stated, "The crime took a course of its own. It wasn't planned that way. People kept coming in and I just panicked."
But he had the Drano in a brown paper bag.
He also he also goes on to try and say that he was, taking alcohol, taking pills, and that there was the drugs that made it happen. But Andrews had also testified that he had never seen him drunk or using drugs.
Okay.
So it could be that he was just trying to rationalize his behavior and try to make it seem like it wasn't really him. It was, he was a changed man because of these substances. But nobody else can corroborate that he did use substances.
And he was just looking for a way out at that point in time.
Yeah, and
that's my opinion.
Well, and contradicting what he said, Orrin Walker also testified during his clemency hearing. He called Pierre a sadist and said that he deserved to die. He said after he shot Mrs. Nesbitt first, then he was kind of prancing or walking in a manner that I got the impression he was kind of enjoying what he was doing. This has been hard for me. It's hard for me to believe that I was ever involved with this. My son Stanley's life was taken with 2 shots and Drano. He tried 5 different times to kill me. Each one could have been lethal. It certainly has changed our lives. He said that his younger son refuses to go to the basement. He'll only sleep in his parents' room, and his wife can barely get out of bed.
Who is calling right now through such an important moment?
I know.
And why is my phone not on silence?
That was the question I was going to ask, because this is 2025. No phone should be ringing.
Ever. So sorry.
So, that is Pierre Selvey.
Pierre was definitely having a power move.
I guess technically Dale Selby Pierre, but also Pierre Dale Selby. So that was him. So William Andrews was only 19 at the time of the crime. He was also a helicopter mechanic at Hill Air Force Base. He was born in Louisiana and had been previously stationed in Dallas. So during the trial, it came out again that their plan was to kill anybody that they came across while they were robbing the store. Andrews's death conviction, when he was sentenced to death, it was very controversial because he didn't directly kill anybody. So all of the actual actions that killed people were taken by Pierre. Andrews was there. Andrews admitted to administering Drano down their throats, right, and forcing them to drink that. But he is not the one that shot anybody. He is not the one that raped anybody. He is not the one that stabbed a pencil into anybody's eardrum.
Right. But the plan was to kill people with Drano, and he did administer the Drano.
He did. But yeah, there's a lot of controversy about the death penalty anyway, but even in the 70s, right, there was a lot of controversy about, like, can you be given the death penalty if you did not kill somebody?
I hear what you're saying, but if we're talking about intent, he intended to kill people.
He did.
That was the plan.
That was his plan. And he thought that's what he was going to be doing. But so devil's argument.
Right,
look at it this way.
I hear what you're saying.
So say you have a plan, and this is not, I'm letting everybody know from the outset, this is not the same thing. I'm just like framing it in a different way. You have a plan to go rob your next door neighbor's house, right? That is your plan.
That's my plan.
And so you go and it's nighttime and you break a window and you go in and you take stuff and you leave and you think that you robbed your next door neighbor's house. But you were confused and you actually broke into your home and you took your stuff. You fully intended to commit a crime, right? Like
Yep.
that was what you wanted to do. That is what you thought you did. But you didn't commit a crime because you can't steal your own stuff. You can't break
Right.
into your own home.
Correct.
Right? So he intended to commit murder by making them drink Drano, but the
Yep.
Drano was not what killed them. He did not commit murder. He intended to, but he didn't do it. Right?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great can that you've opened up right there. That's fantastic. Oh, I don't think I've ever even heard of, I don't think I've ever even thought of it that way.
So it's a question, and it's one that is argued a lot. Is intent plays a factor, right? There are crimes where you have to have the intent to commit the crime in order to be found guilty of it, and then there's crimes where you don't have to have the intent, right? It's like if you're speeding whether or not you intended to, right? That's not a state of mind crime. But in this case, you know, the big argument was, yeah, okay, he wanted to do a really bad thing. He did. But he didn't do it. He was found guilty of it still. And he was sentenced to death. Should he be sentenced to death for wanting to commit a crime that he didn't commit? That was the argument, right?
That's the argument for sure.
And
Yeah.
it's a big argument. And because of that, so he was set, his first date that was set for his death sentence was for August 22nd, 1989. But he just kept being given stays of execution by the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals because
it's a huge, like, that's huge.
It is.
That's huge. I hear, yeah, that is a moral quandary.
Yes, and then you also throw into the fact that they were both black men convicted by a jury of white men. Right? So there's there's this whole thing, because while all of this is also happening, they're being held at Utah State Prison and they are hated. Everybody else who is on death row hates them, which I don't know what you have to do to get to be on death row and have other people on death row think you're a bad person.
Right. What kind of status is that?
But there
Like,
was
they think it's because they just did such a horrible job. Like, what? Yeah, why?
That's the thing. So in 1977, so they're on death row at this point, that a convicted murderer named Gary Gilmore was reported to have said, "I'll see you in hell, Pierre and Andrews," as he passed them on his way to his death execution by firing squad.
Wow.
It was also, and just so I'm fair reporting, there was two. So there's one outlet that reported that he said that. Another news outlet reported that he said, "Adios, Pierre and Andrews. I'll be seeing you directly."
Okay.
So despite, and we will get a little bit more into the appeals process and the controversy, but eventually Andrews' sentence was upheld and he was executed by lethal injection on July 30th, 1992 at the age of 37.
Okay, so this would be a great thing to comment on, listeners. Andrews, should he have gotten the death penalty? Just drop us a little comment. Let us know what you think, or if you have any questions that you're looking for further clarification on.
Yeah.
Before you make that decision.
Yeah, because it was a fight, right? Like it was a big, and I see it. I see both sides of it. I see the people that thought he should be executed. I see the people that thought he shouldn't be.
Yep.
So his last words his second to last words were, "Thank those who tried so hard to keep me alive. I hope they continue to fight for equal justice after I'm gone. Tell my family goodbye and I love them." And then seconds before he died, he lifted up his head and said, "I love you, bye-bye," to his sister who was present at his execution.
That's sad. That's sad for her.
Meanwhile, so Keith Roberts, he was also 19 at the time of the crime. He was born in Oklahoma, and he is the only one that was married. He had a wife and an infant son at the time of his arrest. He initially denied being a part of it, but eventually admitted that he did act as a getaway driver, but he thought nobody else would be in the store. He thought that the plan was that it was closed, it would be empty, it would be kind of a simple in and out.
You know, and why? Why did they go in when there were people there? Why didn't Pierre just wait the 15 minutes before the store
I
closed?
think he wanted to kill somebody. I think
Yeah, I
he
think he
wanted
was
the
really like
excuse.
he was tripping on some. I mean, not tripping like physically on a chemical thing, but he there was something else happening in his psyche where he wanted to have power over people in a harmful way, like in a hurtful way.
Yes, I completely agree. So Roberts has claimed that he only met Andrews on the day of the robbery, but different witnesses stated that they had seen the two together repeatedly driving around a different stereo shop in Ogden. So that is probably not true. The prosecution also brought forth a witness that said that Roberts was seen pacing back and forth in front of the hi-fi store around the same time that the killings occurred, despite his insisting that he stayed in the vans. He never left the vans. He was just the getaway driver. He
Mm.
was acquitted of murder, like we said, and just convicted of aggravated robbery. He got paroled on May 12th, 1987. So he'd been in prison for about 13 years. He moved to Oklahoma and he worked for an Oklahoma City electronics store, which I think is
Huh.
interesting that they hired him.
Well,
But
that also leads to the fact that they were talking about this, and maybe one of the reasons why they hired him was because he knew about electronics, or like that he was part of the group. Because then, I mean, their plan is to resell all this,
I would
or
imagine, yeah.
so that anyway, it does not bolster his testimony of not having known anything until the day of.
Yes. He died by suicide, by gunshot, on August 8th, 1992, just about a week after Andrews' execution.
Do we have more information about that? That's
No note. No. I mean, it was about 5 years after he got out of prison.
right.
I don't know if he was corresponding with Andrews, if he felt guilty, if he I don't know. But about a week after Andrews was executed, he committed suicide.
That is that just it, every bit makes this story more and more tragic.
I mean, right now we're at 6 people, right, that never had to die. The 3 victims and all 3 criminals, right? All of them are dead, and none of them had to be, because this didn't have to happen. And it didn't have to
It
happen
didn't.
this way. And it's so
Senseless.
so senseless. So
Was he still? I mean, was he still married?
I
Did he have
have
any contact
there
with his child?
I am assuming, from what little I was able to find, I am assuming his wife divorced him while he was in prison. Um, and even if he hadn't been in prison, it was the 70s. She would have gotten full custody of their son. I have no idea. I never was able to find anything that he remarried, or that the divorce was finalized, or if she just left him. I couldn't find anything about his family or his child. I am assuming they have distanced themselves pretty thoroughly from that situation, because, like you said, this was notorious in Ogden, right? This
Yes.
was talked about for you were growing up there in the 80s, and this was still talked
Yeah.
about, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was still talked about in the 90s, because that's when it was a whole resurgence thing when Andrews got executed. And it was super controversial, right? The NAACP and the Amnesty International, they both campaigned to commute the death sentences. They said that they should be revoked because there was racial bias, right? The defendants were both black, the victims and the jury pool were all white. The only black member of the jury pool was stricken preemptorily by the prosecution. But they did try to make a big stink about that. I'm just going to let everybody know, investigation into that juror was dismissed because he was a law enforcement officer and he knew all of the law enforcement officials that were tied to the case.
Right. Well,
So,
it wouldn't have mattered what color his skin was. Then he would have
no.
been
And that's the thing. He was not stricken
based on color.
based on color. He was stricken because he was a police officer that knew the other police officers.
Correct.
Like, the prosecution were the ones that preemptively dismissed him, but the defense were also going to strike him, right? Like, he never would have made it onto that jury pool no matter what.
Yep.
So Andrews also accused the judicial system of racism. He was able to get letters from Pope John Paul II that signed by 40 members of the clergy, Catholic clergy from Utah. They asked for clemency. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints did not endorse that that request with Pope John Paul II, but it didn't matter. The Court of Appeals and the governor did not step in. So after Pierre was executed, but before Andrews was executed, there was a petition to stay his execution because the Inter-American Commission alleged that a handwritten note saying "hang the niggers" had been found in a jury area during recess. So nobody at that time was able to produce the physical note. The jury was sequestered during the trial. They were transported every day to a place called Lee's Cafe in Bountiful, which, as a side note, big distance.
Big distance.
Traveling from Farmington to Bountiful just for lunch every single day.
Farmington has food places.
It does. And so does Ogden, right? And both of those are closer than Bountiful. I don't know what that was. That's a whole
interesting different can of worms.
But every day they were eating there. And so during lunch, one of the jurors said, when all this was investigated and looked into, one of the jurors saw that those words had been written on a napkin in the dining area where they had been repeatedly served. So there was no idea if that had come from a juror, if that had come from a member of the staff, if that had come from a customer who just saw that, these same people were coming in every single day and realized that they were juror members. Nobody has any idea where that note came from, and the physical note itself was not found for this appeal. And so that so Andrews' death sentence was upheld. And he was, as we've mentioned, executed.
Oh, yeah. Well, so now that's on the books, Bonnie. Now people can be like, well, in the case of whatever this case is called, right? And they could argue to have the death sentence in the instance of intent.
They can.
Would that fly today, you think?
I don't because at a date that my brain is not remembering, the Supreme Court of the United States, right, has tailored the death penalty a few different times, right? So you can't, if you are under the age of 18 and you kill somebody, you cannot get the death penalty. If you're a minor, you can't get the death penalty. If you have a mental condition like Down syndrome or something of that kind, and you kill somebody, you can't get the death penalty.
Yep.
And you can't get the death penalty unless you kill someone. Right?
All right.
Now, he was found guilty of murder, so he does meet that standard. But I don't think that today
he would meet that standard.
A prosecutor, like he meets the standard, right? Because to be found guilty of killing somebody, you're like, he didn't kill them, but he was found guilty of killing them, right?
Right. So do you think that he would even?
I just think a prosecutor probably wouldn't try for the death penalty in his case because he didn't kill them. Right? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yes.
Yeah. I do also think, and part of it, I want to be cognizant of the fact that there were and still are racial biases in the justice system, because there are, and everywhere. I'm sure that part of the reason that his jury was all white is because Ogden, especially in the 70s, did not have a plethora of black people.
That is true.
Like if you took a subset of, like if you just scooped down and scooped up a bunch of people in Ogden, you would have some Hispanics and you'd have a lot of white people. And you might have one or two black people, but that is just and especially in the 70s, Ogden's makeup was just more white and Hispanic.
Well, and I do think that they probably would have found more black people in Ogden because of Hill Air Force Base, because the base is military tends to mix people up, right? But when you take the jury out of Farmington, it's going to be even more white.
It is.
That's just the way. That's just who lived there at the time.
Yeah, and I do think I could easily see a world today, if this happened in 2025, where prosecutors went for the death penalty with Pierre, but did not go for the death penalty with Andrews.
Yes.
So I am of two minds, right? And you have to factor in too, when the judge handed down that sentence, he has heard testimony from the only living survivor who's able to speak about what he went through.
Right. And you still do have the living survivor with the brain damage, right?
And you do. And his
Which
family speaks on
is
behalf of him, right?
right. Which is, I imagine that's fairly potent to see that person as well.
I would imagine so. And it was still very fresh because they went to trial 6 months after the crime occurred. It was still very much so fresh in the community, right?
Absolutely.
In what people were feeling and seeing. In fact, at the time they went to trial, Courtney Nesbitt still wasn't out of the hospital.
Yes, that's right. The trial finished before Courtney Nesbitt even got out of the hospital.
Yes.
Like the whole thing. All the evidence gathered, the trial, and then the sentencing, all done before Courtney ever even gets out of the hospital.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they moved fast. But I can see for sure the arguments that Andrew should not have been sentenced to death. I can also see the arguments that he should have, because he was there and he didn't stop Pierre. Like their plan was to kill people, and he didn't stop Pierre from being, not even just from killing them, right? But he didn't stop him from raping Michelle Ansley. He didn't stop him from trying to strangle Mr. Walker, or from, shoving a pen into his ear so hard that it came out his throat. He didn't do any of those things. Like, he didn't try to stop any of that from happening.
Right. And I can see all those things as well.
So now I want to end it by telling you about the victims and giving them just a tiny bit of information about each of them.
Excellent.
So Michelle Ansley, her full name was Sherry Michelle Ansley. She was born on January 24th of 1956. She had only gotten hired at the hi-fi shop 1 week before the murders.
Oh, it makes it more tragic. Fun, more tragic.
This is actually going to make it even worse.
Oh, good.
She had recently become engaged and was planning on getting married on August 5th, 1974.
Oh.
I know, isn't it so sad?
That does make it more tragic. I thought we had reached our max tragedy.
No, we haven't.
No.
Courtney Nesbitt was born Byron Courtney Nesbitt. His dad is also Byron. He was born on September 25th of 1957. He was a student at Ogden High School at the time. Although he did survive his injuries, he had amnesia and brain injuries. He was unable to testify at trial. He returned to school more than a year after the incident, and he was able to graduate in 1976. But because of the brain damage that he had from his head wound, he had to drop out of college, and he couldn't hold down a job. So he had to apply for Social Security assistance to be able to live.
Oh.
He did get married on November 15th of 1985 to a woman named Catherine Hunter. But he suffered chronic pain for the rest of his life from his injuries, and he died on June 4th, 2002 at the age of 44.
Oh, he's so young.
Very young.
I'm really glad he couldn't remember it. But now I'm wondering, like, would he wonder that this was, I don't know. Anyway, at first I thought I was glad, but now I think that I'm not sure.
I know.
Yeah.
His mom, Carol Elaine Nesbitt, maiden name Peterson, was born on December 25th, 1921. She was 52 when she was shot and killed, and was pronounced dead at the hospital. Stanley Orrin Walker was the other employee, age 20. He was born March 19th, 1954, and he had the quickest death, they believe, when he was shot in the head with Pierre, and probably suffered the least. He still had the Drano, so he still suffered, but suffered the least. And then Orrin William Walker, Stanley's father, was born on September 17th, 1930. He was the sole survivor to testify at trial against the perpetrators, and it was largely on the strength of his testimony that they were convicted. And he died on February 13th, 2000, age 69, of natural causes.
Oh. Yeah, but that's still pretty young.
It is. It is very young, and I have zero doubts that the trauma of what he went through still took years off his life.
I agree.
Because you can't be forced to drink some Drano, even if you like let it slide out, it's still around his mouth.
Yep.
Be strangled with a wire and have a pen shoved through your eardrum and out your throat
And not have
without
that take a
negative.
toll.
Yeah, that takes a toll on your body. Not to mention just the psychological toll of going through it,
Seeing it happen
testifying
to
about
everybody
it.
else,
Yeah, seeing what
watching
happened.
Michelle get raped,
Mm-hmm.
watching them murder everybody else, forcing everybody else to drink the Drano, and
And then trying to
then
be
having to
strong
go
for
back
your remaining son and wife.
and then having to go testify about it.
Yeah.
And bury your wife and take care of your son. It's just huge.
So yeah,
Huge.
that's the
I'm
story
actually
of the.
really, really, really mad at Pierre. Like
Yeah, no,
right
me
now at this
too.
moment, like
I mean, I've gotten like all of my really intense emotions. They were all happening when I was researching and pulling it together. But I just like I couldn't not tell this story.
I I feel tearful and very upset right now at this person who does no longer exist on the earth. But still, I feel like it was so. We talk about this. We talk about senseless crimes. We've talked about it and almost everything. But this is like ultra senseless.
I know it's awful, and there was just it's so hard for me. This crime is because there was no need. It was bad acts and bad luck and bad timing, right? Because they could have gone. Well, they could have just not robbed the store. But say they're
Yeah.
going to rob the store, they could go when nobody's there. They drive by and they're like, "Oh shoot, there's people here. Let's come back in an hour." But they go in and there's two people there. And then there's three other people that are all just
They just care
they
about their
just
family.
care, right? They
Right.
just well, one that just comes by to grab his car and say thank you. He's just trying to be polite. And then two that just care about their family.
Common courtesy and caring about their family.
And it killed him.
This is where Lance would step in and he would say, "There you go. No good deed goes unpunished." I'm like, "Stop it. The universe."
Yeah, but what mother's not going to go look for her son?
Right.
I mean, what mother is not going to go look for her son that should have been home hours ago?
Right.
So yeah, it was an
Oh,
interesting one. It was tragic and it was awful. It was so sad, and it was also super interesting to me just about the controversy it sparked.
Pierre picked the time where those people hadn't left the store yet
I really
because the
think he
store
did.
wasn't closed.
I really, really think that he very intentionally, and I think Andrews as well. I don't think we should necessarily let him off because he also
Yeah.
was fine with killing whoever he encountered, and he stated that at different times to different people, right? I think that maybe Pierre enjoyed the killing, you know, maybe more than Andrew, but I think both of them fully intended to just go in and rob and kill.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And that's how come I'm like, I can see Andrew's death sentence from both sides. Um, because it wasn't like a crime of passion or spontaneous. It was very thought about in advance. And they could have waited the 15, 20 minutes that the store was closed and the employees left before they came back.
Yeah, they could have.
And they didn't.
And they didn't, and it was just going to be they brought the Drano, which they thought was going to be a magical murder weapon. They brought it with them, right? It wasn't like oh shoot, we better find this thing that can kill somebody. They watched this movie and they're like, yep, that's it. Let's bring it with us to kill them.
Yes. Well, I know I am reeling. I know we're at our time limit. Um, Thank you so much for sharing this very dramatic true crime.
Yeah, I don't actually know what I'm going to do next week because I don't know if I can move on from this one.
Yeah, it's gonna take me a little bit of processing.
Yeah,
And
sorry.
I knew
We have
about
to
it.
like start like a therapy side to our podcast.
I'm gonna have to go watch like a cartoon or something.
Right? Something light, something happy. I'll call you and show you a picture of my baby.
Yay! Yay!
So, yep, that is the story of the Hi-Fi murders. And until next week, keep your tea hot and your curiosity hotter.